welcome to the stage, Elicia Berger.
Okay, let me set the stage for you. It's 1984. My bare feet are against the floor, all clammy. My whole body is clammy. My brother is holding a massive black tape recorder up to my head while I cry. I'm like whining and moaning and gurgling, and it's because there's a string tied around my front tooth, and the other end of it is tied around the doorknob. And so he's going, Elicia, does it hurt? And I'm like, oh, some kind of dying animal sound. And so it begins. My dad, I don't know why, that's a really strange error. My dad kind of pushes my brother away, and he's like, leave her alone, and that's where the tape stops. And he says, it's okay, it's gonna be fine, and I do not believe him whatsoever. So he goes for the door, but luckily it doesn't happen that way. My tooth actually falls out into my hand, and it's this wet pink little shell that I'm holding, and I'm so relieved. And so we clean it up and we put it into a little tiny cassette tape holder so that it's in there clinking around like a little bug in a jar. And we put it under my pillow that night, and I decided to write a letter to the tooth fairy. As if for some reason the tooth fairy has forgotten where the tooth is. And so I write the tooth fairy a letter, put it all under my pillow, lie down, and try to stay awake all night. In the morning, I'm so disappointed that the tooth fairy hasn't come. I'm just devastated. I reach under my pillow, and to my surprise, there is actually an envelope there. So I open it up, and in it there's a letter and a $5 bill, score. So I read the letter, and it says, Dear Elicia, you're a really lucky little girl to have lost your first tooth. In my head, I'm thinking like, okay, luck has nothing to do with string tied to a doorknob and the other end tied to my tooth. But, it says, it's a really wonderful thing to have lost your first tooth, and you must be very brave. And it said, it's signed, it's typewritten, and it's signed from the Tooth Fairy, Region 6, Zone 7. So, the next morning, or rather, in the morning at breakfast, I have a few questions. So I asked my dad, I say, Dad? Yes, honey? So is there more than one tooth fairy? Yeah, of course there is. I mean, kids all around the world lose teeth every night. Of course, there's got to be more than one for every place, because how could one tooth fairy, cover all that area? And I'm like, oh, okay, no, that really makes sense. That makes sense. There's a lot of tooth fairies for all the kids. And then something else pops into my head, and I'm like, Dad? I said, yes, honey? So, how come the tooth fairy has the same stationery as us? So he says, well, it's actually our stationery, because in the middle of the night, she gets your letter and, uses our typewriter to type back to you the letter. And I'm like, oh, okay. So everything's coming together. And after that, I lose a second tooth, I lose a third tooth, and I'm really feeling like the tooth fairy and I are starting to have this kind of bond, this kind of relationship. But I still don't really understand what she's like or who she is. In my mind, it's a she, clearly. I mean, in the beginning, I thought I was like a little winged fairy that flew into my window and got in through the cracks. But after kind of what my dad said to me, I figured that wasn't true. But I still didn't understand how she got into our house, like, through the locked doors and stumbled over all our shoes and boots and everything. So I asked my dad. I was like, Dad? He said, yes. So, how does the tooth fairy get into the house? And he was like, oh, this is because I gave the tooth fairy a key to our house. So I was like, this whole tooth fairy business is totally, makes sense. It's like my dad knows, he's got the key for the tooth fairy. So, we wrote letters back and forth, and I was really, into this relationship that we were building. And like the tooth fairy was so much better than my pen pal, because my pen pal would lame out like when she got a new puppy and when she had a book report, she just wouldn't write to me. But like the tooth fairy had to write to me, and I controlled when the tooth fairy wrote to me. So I started getting like this kind of sick addiction to losing teeth, and like I would love that feeling, like that kind of salty feeling in my mouth, like that adrenaline when I knew the tooth was gonna fall out, and I loved jamming my tongue into that newly vacated gum, you know. And I would kind of like try to get back at my brother, like when my second front tooth was loose, I like called him over. And I was like, look, and I flipped it all the way around and I showed it to him. And he was like, sick, and I was so proud of that, you know? So, after that, when I felt that like the tooth fairy and I were getting really chummy, I decided to get her a gift. So I had my mom take me to the local stationery shop, Cobb's, and we picked out a tablet for her, and it was like this, 5x7 white writing, tablet. And I was really pleased with my choice, and I brought it home and wrapped it up, and my next tooth, I gave it to her, and she wrote me a letter back and was like, "Dear Elicia, this is a wonderful gift. It's just what I would have chosen." And I was so happy, like, to hear this, like, to know it, and I was so excited, even though it was just like this regular writing tablet. And so a few days after that, I saw mysteriously appear this writing tablet, 5x7 writing tablet in my mom's sewing room. And the cover was gone, it was torn off. And I said, "Hey Mom, what happened to the cover that I had?" And she said that she spilled something on it, and so she threw it away. And I felt weird about this. I felt like something not kosher was going on. And I was trying to like figure out through my, just what this feeling was and what was going on, and I was like, did my mom steal the gift that I gave to the tooth fairy? That's what I thought happened, and I was like, oh, I felt just so weird about everything. So, shortly after that, I was walking into my parents' room, dad's dresser, nosing around, and I saw what broke my heart was a letter that I had written to the tooth fairy on his dresser. And I never confronted him about it. I was just too heartbroken. And after that, I let it go, and the next letter to the tooth fairy, from the tooth fairy to me, was very brief, and it said, "Dear Elicia, I have lots of kids to get to tonight." So that was kind of it with my relationship with the tooth fairy. And if I could have done anything again, over again, it would have been the same. I would have told my dad to tie that, string around my tooth and yank the knob hard. Thanks.